Good morning, healing friends. This morning, I woke up to a feeling of kind of major panic in the world healing field. So before I even woke up, I found myself doing the breath exercises that regulate my vagal nerve system in relationship to panic, in relationship to fight or flight, or any type of triggering. So we can do this breathing, and it's a very simple breathing. You double the breath out to the breath in. So if you go, 4 counts breath in, 8 counts breath out, or you go 5 counts breath in, 10 counts breath out. You just double the out breath. And in order, some people say, well, I can't breathe twice as long out as in. And my suggestion is breathe slower. Don't let the breath out so fast. Let the breath in fast and then out slow. Just my saying that, let the breath in fast and out slow. And I say the word slow. And then my hands go down, and by you watching this, and YouTube may have some subliminal images going on behind my video, but I don't have any subliminal images other than, I like to put a halo above my head that, a ring of Saturn or something, so people think, oh, this guy's spiritual. So so there's a little subliminal programming. I don't know what side to point to, but that painting on the wall was a gift to me as a graduation present from chiropractic college. And it was a painting done by a neighbor of mine in the mountains in Sonoma County, the mountains between Sonoma and Napa, a road called Cavedale Road, and towards the top of that road was formerly Hooker Creek Farm, which later on became a vineyard, a startup vineyard. It never remained a vineyard, but we planted all the fields with grapes, and they were growing. But then my friend's marriage decided to disintegrate, and he decided to get out while the getting was good, so he sold off the property, and the next person to buy it was Noboru Muramoto, possibly, who was a Chinese medicine doctor and was real famous, had a book. Everybody was reading it at the time. And so he came in and he took over, and he was going to do some farming operations and have this be the center of his organization. But then his, house burned down, and then he felt like maybe the property had some bad juju or something. And it might have had some bad juju because the property was formerly owned by Bill, who was a friend of Jack London and purportedly had an affair with Jack London's wife. And Bill ran a speakeasy out of the giant lodge on this property where you could get alcohol and friendship. But it was like from the town of Glen Ellen, which wasn't a very big town. It was off Highway 12 on the way to Santa Rosa, and on the way down to Sonoma. Glen Ellen has Mary's Pizza, which to this day is still the best pizza I've ever had. But you go up Cavedale Road, and it was 2 miles up. to Hooker Creek Farm or, you know, Glen Ellen Vineyard, whatever you want to call it. But it was a couple miles up that windy road, which was a one-lane road, so you wanted to go fast enough to get to school on time. If you were going to school in Santa Rosa, which some people I know did for almost a whole semester, drop out. I just became too enamored with the property and farming and stuff. But if somebody was coming up the road and you were coming down the road, you literally had to drive up on the side of the hill as they passed you and come back down again. So, you know, when you're 19 years old, you're like, yeah, I drove my Volkswagen, my 1961 Volkswagen Bug in the desert. We all did it. We all drove our Volkswagens in the desert because you could drive that Volkswagen anywhere. I eventually drove that same Volkswagen. First I sold it to my dad, and then when I was going to chiropractic college years later, my dad gave it to me as a present. It was a beautiful present. And I drove it all the way across the country, like 2,000 plus miles I drove from San Francisco because I visited friends first before I went across. But I was down in LA, drove up to San Francisco, I think, and then drove across to Davenport, Iowa in the summer in a Volkswagen, no air conditioning, 2 parakeets. So I had to keep the parakeets cold, and I managed to do that. So I was going to start off this video, and I'm just going to make this video and see what I want to do with it. But I was going to start off the video and I was going to say, this is Steve, and I'll be your server. Today, the specials on, that are not on the menu are the anger bomb omelet, the frightfully fearful frittata, and the grief linguine. These are the specials. Regular items on the menu include mild depression pie, grief witch sandwich, bipolar rolls, paranormal, paralegal, paranoidal pomegranate sauce to go with your sandwiches. That was kind of the state I woke up this morning. Before I woke up this morning, I was doing breathing exercises, and I was thinking that before long, I'm going to find myself in the dream world doing yoga, and physically actually doing the yoga, so I don't have to be awake. Because there's so much work going on in the dream world that it made me feel like I needed to go, and get some Botox so I would look cuter to myself when I looked in the mirror. I'd be more attractive if I had these. Lips, I think it was my children might have watched South Park. I only saw maybe a few episodes, and I just know that Kenny died in a lot of them. And I hope that's not I'm giving you information you didn't want to have. But Kenny does die, but then he shows up in the next episode, so it's not really that problematic. But everybody seemed to have big lips. And so I just decided I would just go out, have the dentist pull out one of my teeth to make me look more regular guy, and then I get some Botox for my lips, and then people would trust me. I mean, it's an old guy who's willing to get Botox so he can look just so much cooler. You do fish lips. I really think I'm going to post this video. My wife never watches my videos, so I'm not going to get in trouble. I might have some far back genetics of the pufferfish. Could have used that in high school when I was trying to intimidate the larger boys that were thinking about giving me a few blows to the skull. Meanwhile, I am detoxing the skull. I mean, it's nice when your hair gets thinner, but not thin enough that everybody's like, he kind of looks bald. Not quite that thin, but thinner, so that you can actually feel all those little places where the detox of your central nerve system is taking place. So when in your mind, you might be someone like me, heaven forbid, but in my mind, let's not go into your mind, let's go into my mind. In my mind, I'm a person who tends to latch on to some subject and then gnaw on that bone until I feel like I've digested, possibly mastered a subject. And then I go, okay, next. It's like a meal to me. I do keep it oftentimes limited to one aspect. And I've really sometimes, but I eat the same meal every day, which is vibrational healing. Like, that's been on my plate every day for as long as I can remember. I mean, if I go back to 1972 and or 71, I was in hairstyling school. They had stopped. They had rebranded it from barber college to hairstyling school. Matter of fact, I think they called it Roston University of Hair Design. That's some heavy rebranding from barber college. Roston University of Hair Design. Don't you just feel like I could be a star? Kind of like a modeling agency. Ralston University of Hair Design produces amazing sculptures of the tonsorial product. They can take carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur based material and sculpt it in a way that the person will look close to a Hollywood star. A big-lipped Hollywood star. Make my day. Whatever. I'm playing, so I'm going to go, Steve here. I'm playing in the realm of reality. I'm playing. But I'm playing with things that I'm experiencing. So, the experience of fear, panic, anxiety was real and has been real for maybe months now, where that was the main energetic that I was clearing from the world healing field. So if you're making up a story, that voices in your head in 2020, end of January, voices in your head suggested to you that you use your energetic knowledge that you have been using with individuals to create healing fields that then individuals could be in and change, that you take that knowledge that you have of doing that and expand the scope of it. So you take it from you took it from individual healing fields. So when I would go back with a client to an event, we'd go to an event that the client needed to release and integrate. And then, probably in 2018, I'm guessing, I was told to invite all souls back to the event to release and integrate the energy of the event for themselves. All of a sudden, we were dealing with a slightly bigger field. And then at the end of January in 2020, these voices in my head said, we want you to open up a field for the world. You had to have a pretty good imagination to even imagine the world and imagine a healing field around the world. Just to imagine that seemed to me to be beyond my imagination, but then I was able to imagine it, I was able to do it, and then not only was I able to imagine it and do it, I was totally able to suffer as a result of having done it. I mean, I had built up. First of all, I had built up to working with an individual with their intense anger, grief, and fear energetics around unresolved events. And then I worked up to small groups of souls, larger groups of souls, larger groups of souls, Colosseum-filled groups of souls, hundreds of thousands of souls. And it was intense at first, and then my body integrated that, and I was able to do it. And then from there, went to the world healing field. And really, it was a smackdown. Because I probably had some pride on how well my development was going, how well my abilities were going relative to healing sessions and people coming in with certain things going on and going out with those things not going on. I felt like I did a good job. I felt like I was giving what I was offering. And then the world healing field just felt like really, if I was standing on a short pedestal, like, the pedestal was knocked out from under me, and I felt I crashed, and I went like, whoa, I can't do this. And they said, well, certainly you can. You just need a little help from people on the ground. So write an email, send out some texts, let your people, now my people are my friends, and these blend in with each other, but my friends, my clients, my students are my people. So people have been studying energy work with me as long as I've been doing it, because I was always teaching it, because I got better at it when I taught it. And so I was always teaching. It was my passion. It was my sole purpose. Here I am again, teaching. 50 years later. I mean, even in chiropractic college, which started in 1977, and finished in 1980. But even in chiropractic college, I was teaching classes. Once I know something, I teach the younger students how to do it. Even in my last year of clinic, I was the head sacral or heart, but sacral occipital technique instructor, overseer. So I was overseeing everyone in the clinic who was doing SOT. I was overseeing their work. Then I went on to teach SOT for another 6 years. And then I got involved in Atlantean healing crystal work. And I ended up teaching that, helping to teach that for a number of years. I studied neurolinguistic programming. Really, literally, within the first few months of studying it, I began teaching it out of my home. Because when I taught it, I really got it. Yeah, you teach something and you don't own it, it comes out really fast. So by teaching it, it forces you to own it. It forces you to only teach what you own. This video, I think, well, there'll only be a few of you that feel like, a few, and the only way I know not the only way I know. One way that I really get that another person has gotten what I was saying is when they speak it back to me, and they speak it back to me from inside themselves. And I go, cool. We need to be embodying this work. And I'll tell you how it will bring value to your life. I've been studying healing work since 1971 or 2. Let's just say 72. And so 50, well, actually I began studying it in a psychological when I was 19, so years, 54, 50, 55 years. And then I started studying more the energy aspect of it in 71, 72. So that's another 52 years of really, literally, almost constant study of how energy works. And so I'm going to give you the secret of this lifetime study. We could go into other lifetimes of study. Mystery schools in Egypt. I was there. I was participating. I was interested. This is my interest, is healing. So here's the secret. In order to heal, you have to do two things. You have to be able to get your fingers in balance, and you have to be able to move them in opposite directions. See if I can still do this. If I watch my fingers, I can still do it. But if I think about it, of course, I can't do it, because you can't move your fingers in opposite directions. Your fingers want to move in the same direction. But with enough concentration, you can move your fingers in opposite directions. So you have to have control of your brain to get, it's like piano. You got to control your brain. You got to be able to have one hand doing one thing and the other hand doing the other thing. One hand going like this and the other hand going like this at the same time. That's piano. And I would have stayed with piano longer because I just loved piano. I would have stayed with it longer if I hadn't had a nun who was my piano teacher who lived by the ruler. The rule of thumbs is if a person has their hands on the piano keys and they aren't holding their hands properly, you take the ruler and you smack their fingers with it. That's like the God that she believed in. The God who would smote her if she didn't smote him. So she would just smote the little ones and have them contract up and get traumatized and decide very rapidly that they didn't want to play the piano anymore because the piano was dangerous. And think of, in the 8 billion people on the planet, think of how many of them have had some traumatized person pass on the trauma to them in a physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual manner. And think how many of our ancestors went through traumas, smoting, based on the belief in God. It was usually humans that were actually smoting the people. How many of those traumatized ancestors did their genetics all come together into us? So as babies, as newborns, I would have to show you my feet because I actually came out feet first. I've been back through that birth 20 times at least to release the pain of people pulling on your feet while your head's stuck in the pelvis. And when you make it out of that warm, dark, water-filled space, and you get hit by that air of the room and by the unfiltered sounds of that room, typically for so many years, if you didn't have a midwife who actually knew what she was doing, you would have someone clamp the umbilical cord. So this will be a healing for you. So you can just be aware this may be enough to heal it for you. So they would put a clamp on one side and a clamp on the other side. On one side, the umbilical cord went inside your mother, attached to the placenta, which fed you for 9 months. On the other side of the umbilical cord, it went down to your belly button, your umbilicus. And through that connection of the umbilical cord, the mother's blood was passed to you as your nutrients for growing your body. And then that body comes out of the womb, and most of the time, except in third world countries where they're just possibly doing it more naturally, in the more advanced civilizations, they disrupt the process and give you maybe your first trauma. And they take it and they clamp one side of the umbilical cord and they clamp the other side and they cut you off from blood and oxygen because you haven't made that transition where your heart valves shift and your heart begins pumping the blood itself, and then it naturally shuts off the blood flowing from your mother, and the pulse stops in the umbilical cord. So if you just put your fingers, I've attended 2 births, I think, maybe more, but I've attended 2 for sure. And if you put your fingers over the umbilical cord, you can feel the blood being pumped from the mother to even after the newborn comes out, that blood continues to pump, for 3 to 5 minutes, and then it stops. At which point, you don't have to clamp it because the blood isn't flowing, but they still clamp it and cut it, and they cut it, and then the umbilical cord just dries up, pulls back in and dries up, and becomes the belly button. So, by doing this, could heal that tension in the umbilicus and in the whole body based on having the blood cut off too quickly. So instead of them clamping and cutting, you're going to reenact your own birth, and in your birth, you come out of the womb. They take you and they place you in your mother's arms. Your mother clears out anything in your mouth that might need to come out and puts you to her breast. And you begin to nurse, and you begin to have that mother's milk come into your system, and your umbilical cord it no longer is pulsing, and it can just be cut. And it's cut, and you don't even feel it because you're done with it. So that trauma can be over for you. That trauma of that initial entry into the world. And in the new world that we're moving into, one of the things that's going to begin happening is we're going to be honest. It's not going to be a sales organization. You're not going to be sold a product that's no good for you. Doctors are actually going to leave the Hippocratic Oath and go back to the Hippocratic Oath. And the Hippocratic Oath, based on Hippocrates, I guess, was do no harm. And if you simply have your medical practice be do no harm to kitties or humans, do no harm, then more than likely you'll stop giving your patients drugs, for the most part. And you'll teach them how to care for their own bodies through proper nutrition. And then the farmers will begin working with their soil, so the soil has some nutrients that can pass into the plants. And the plants won't be chemically engineered to have toxins that are resistant to the bugs. So when the bugs eat the plant, it kills the bugs. And then they don't reproduce and make more bugs that chew on the plants. But when you digest those foods that are either genetically modified and have chemicals in their genetic makeup because they were made to be that way, and then they're sprayed as well with substances that cause insect intestines to explode, insect stomachs to blow up. And you wonder why you have what's diagnosed now as leaky gut syndrome. Why is your gut leaking? Quite possibly it's because you've been digesting food sprayed with chemicals to kill bugs. And those chemicals go into your intestine and they eat away at your intestine. And your intestine has a great thing to do with your mental function. So if your intestines are injured, you can't digest your food as well. You get large molecule proteins coming through the intestinal wall, which lead to allergic reactions to those large molecule proteins that aren't digested and normally can't get through the wall until they are digested. So we just see how this complication of factors just keeps happening the further we get away from nature. The term, it ain't natural. It just ain't natural. And if it ain't natural, it ain't good for you. That's all I'm going to say about it. Well, I'm loving this video. I'm going to watch it. I'm not going to necessarily post it. I will upload it, and I'll put it on just private for now, and we'll just see what we do after that. So now must go, and thanks for listening, and I've just really enjoyed having fun with you this morning. Now must go.